This probably sounds fake, but I promise it's not. I wish I had some evidence it happened because it still haunts me. This happened a little while back. I was on the bus in Chicago on the way back home from work. It was on a route I always take and still do. Nothing unfamiliar at all to me. We made a stop to pick up a person, and the person that got on the bus was a fairly tall, thin, older black man that was wearing white clothing and holding a trash bag that was filled to the brim with something. It looked like clothes, but it was extremely large for riding on the bus with. His white clothing, I can't remember exactly what it looked like, but I remember thinking how impressive it was that he had on white shoes, pants, and shirt that didn't look at all stained. As he got on the bus, he started moving towards the back. And then I realized that I hadn't seen him tap his card to get on the bus, or put any money in the thing. I figured he would once he got settled, but that didn't happen. It felt as if the entire bus didn't see this person in the same way I was seeing him. No one looked at him strangely or acknowledged his existence at all, which wouldn't be unusual except for his striking all-white outfit and large black trash bag he was carrying with him. I was standing in the middle of the bus between the seats, and he started moving towards me, which, again, wasn't unusual. But when we met and he was trying to move by, he took my hand and whispered into my ear. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something existential and along the lines of, "Do you think everything will be alright?" I think I said, yes. And I remember his hands being very bony, but his skin being extra soft. From the moment he was on the bus, the air felt differently, and in the moment he touched my hand, I felt calm, like meeting an old friend sort of feeling. The way he grabbed my hand wasn't forceful. It was gentle, and wasn't weird at all for being a stranger on the bus. After that altercation, he let go of my hand and proceeded to get off the bus at the next stop, which didn't seem unusual until afterward. I realized he hasn't paid, and only stayed on for one stop. I went home like usual, and on the way home I texted my partner to tell them all about what happened. I actually wrote down what he said to me in a text at the time, and I'm still trying to recover that message. I can't remember if this had happened before or after this incident on the bus, but a Lyft driver was telling me about how in her culture, there is a tradition of older women who make deals with the devil, and afterward they wear all white clothing and wear a rosary around their neck. She said they ask for things like people being brought back from the dead and crazy shit like that. She even said it had a name, but I can't for the life of me think of what it was called. I sometimes wonder if this is something the guy on the bus had did. It also could have just been another regular person on the bus that just happened to be wearing all white. But whatever it was, please sir, let's not meet again. When I was younger, I went to a religious education program after school that was like 3 blocks from my house. One night, my dad dropped me and my big sister off when I was 7 and she was 9. The church had high school classes on different nights, so when we realized we weren't supposed to be there, the priest just told me and my sister to go home. So that was already bad, but it was winter and I was freezing and complaining. When we got legit just a block from the church, a car pulled up next to us. It was a lady in the front and a guy in the passenger seat. She looked like my religious ed teacher. She said, "Hey girls, do you guys want to ride? Your mom sent us." My mom works nights and we called nobody to tell them we were walking. My sister was smart enough to say in an instant no, but I tried to walk up to their car because I was the smartest kid. So my sister made us change routes and we got home a bit later. The next time we went to that church, my dad asked my teacher if she was the woman in the car. She was pretty concerned because she wasn't. So a special thanks to my sister for not letting me get kidnapped. Pretty horrifying that possible kidnappers were right in the neighborhood I still live in. Me and a big group of friends were at a gas station at like 2 a.m. We live in a small town, so there's nothing better to do. A man with two backpacks on, no shirt, and a pair of pants tied around his neck came up to my car and opened my door. He started talking really fast, and I could barely understand what he was saying. Something about trying to sell a gun and being broke. He wouldn't let me close the door, and he wouldn't shut up, so after a few minutes I got pissed off and kicked him in the chest and closed the door. He went into the gas station, and I gathered up the 10 other people I was with, and we planned to jump him. When he came out of the gas station, we all started roasting him. He began laughing hysterically and walked around the corner of the building. A few seconds later, we heard a shotgun pump, and he fired a shot into the air. All 10 of us sprinted to our cars and drove off in about .2 seconds. One of my friends called the cops and called the gas station to warn the clerk, who was there alone. We never found out who the guy was or what happened to him. That kind of thing just isn't common where I live. Our county is known nationwide as the meth capital of the world. Gotta love Franklin County. I live in New York City, and public transportation is like the main source of getting around here. The beginning part may or may not get confusing, but bear with me. Before I start, I must say this is not that interesting or long, but I felt the need to make the post because even though I get uncomfortable sometimes in situations where I don't feel safe, I never felt the need to move to another location, if that makes any sense. I get off at the last stop of a train. In order to get off at the stop before where I usually get off, you must be in one of the first 5 carts in order to get out at that stop. There are a total of 10 carts. The whole train doesn't fit in the station, so that is the reason why all 10 carts don't open. So, moving along. People in the city are glued to their phones. If you drive in New York City, be careful, like, seriously, because people here don't seem to value their lives crossing the street staring at their phones. I use my phone often, but I am always aware of my surroundings. I like to sit in the 6th car, where the conductor is, because those doors don't open and the cart is usually empty. 3 stops before the last stop, a man gets on. I think nothing of it, so I keep reading Reddit stories on my phone. I glance at him and I notice he is wearing a silver Halloween mask. Red flag number 1 for me, but wasn't so severe. I shrug it off and keep using my phone. I glance up again and notice he's not wearing any shoes or socks. I thought to myself, okay, he's homeless, normal thing in the city. A minute or 2 passes by and I'm on my phone at this point. I notice him looking around and moving his stuff. That was red flag number 2 for me. He then pulled out those little scissors you can use to cut hair and started playing with it while looking around. That was red flag number 3 for me, and that was it. At this point, it's 2 stops before mine. The last chance you have to transfer to the first 5 carts. I got out and went to the front of the train. Now, I could have been exaggerating, but I just felt so uneasy and uncomfortable once I saw the scissors in his hand. I also noticed in my head that Halloween is coming up and crazy things start to happen around this time. I did not want to be around if something was to happen, and if something did happen, I could have been hurt if I did not follow my gut, or could have seen something traumatizing. As soon as my stop arrived, I sped walk out of the train station, looking behind me here and there, and I sprinted home. Guy wearing the Halloween mask? Even though we didn't really meet, let's not meet, ever. So I'm a university student. There's a sushi place with great sushi within walking distance from my campus. So I went and got sushi to go, and I was walking back to campus with it. I was holding the bag with sushi in it. I passed a guy on the sidewalk. He looked homeless and he was dirty, and his clothes were a bit tattered. So as I was passing him, I shit you not, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, I'd kill you for that food. And he wasn't using a joking kind of tone. He sounded dead serious. I just stopped and looked at him. He kept walking and said once more, "I'd kill you for that food." I was in shock upon hearing this and a little bit scared. I watched him walk off, and once he was quite a ways from me, he looked back and mouthed, "Kill you." I didn't call the police because he'd have been gone by the time they got there. I was just shocked, and to be honest, I'm really glad he didn't pull out a knife or something. I'm glad to be alive. So, creepy homeless guy, let's not meet. If you are a fan of Halloween and enjoy dressing up, then you are probably familiar with those pop-up Halloween stores that take over abandoned shopping malls or spots in strip malls for a few weeks each year only to disappear again until the next year. I live in a small town, and while I'm sure we could have gone to the local Walmart, my two friends and I wanted to try the new pop-up Halloween store, Mr. Funtime's Halloween Extravaganza. Everyone had been chatting about the new place in town, and there were signs hung up all over the place. Come one, come all, to Mr. Funtime's Halloween Extravaganza. It was one of those places that took a spot at the end of town in the long abandoned mall that closed the following summer. Rumor was the city was going to tear it down and build a new parking lot for nearby businesses. That hadn't happened yet, but what was temporarily in its place was the most amazing Halloween store I had ever seen. The place was huge and fit with a mini carnival outside with clowns with makeup done so well you would swear it was real. They smiled and waved as we walked in the front of the store, and they were everywhere. They were made to look exactly like Mr. Funtime, the store's mascot, which was all green with black hair and fangs that, when he grinned, had little words written on them that said Halloween written on them. It was weird, but for whatever reason it seemed to work. People all over town flocked to the new store in droves. They sold foods like hot dogs, nachos, and cheese, and when you entered the store it was dark except for black lights all over and more of those green clowns that offered their assistance to help you find just the right costume. I was looking around the store when my friend, Joe, gravitated directly towards these weird masks that were painted all white. On his way over, he knocked over a stand with glass makeup paints and they spilled all over. All the clowns in the store stopped what they were doing and looked at Joe. Joe smirked and rolled his eyes, not even attempting to pick it up. "Dude, aren't you gonna tell someone you did that?" I bent down and picked up the broken glass, and finally a woman with pink hair and dead eyes came over with a mop. "Oh, I'm really sorry." She said nothing to me and just began to clean up the mess as though she were a zombie. I looked around the store and all the green clowns were now back to trying to assist the many customers lined in the store. There was carnival music playing over the loudspeakers, and I tried to concentrate, but it seemed like it was getting louder by the second. "Wow, these are weird," Joe said, picking up a white mask with no holes for breathing or eye holes cut out. It looked like one of those masks you would hang on the wall for decoration but wouldn't wear. "Those are boring. Don't tell me you're gonna buy one of those," I said, wiping the white makeup onto my jeans that seemed to stick to my fingers like slime. What was this stuff made out of? "I don't know, I just like the masks." Joe looked at the masks with a look of a guy that was in love. I didn't understand it, but then my other friend, Eric, looked over toward these giant snakes and decided he just had to have one. I rolled my eyes and ignored them while I walked around the store alone. I was eyeing a pair of giant glasses that I thought looked kind of funny when someone tapped me on the shoulder.
"Break it. you pay for it,"
the voice said. I turned around to look at the face that was greeting me. It was one of those giant green painted clown guys. "I'm just looking."
"Well, is there something I can help you find?"
He grinned wide, and I noticed there was something almost unnatural about his mouth, and I saw it had traces of blood dripping from it. I shrugged it off because it was Halloween after all, and I didn't want to seem scared. "I'm okay for now. I just thought these giant glasses looked kind of funny." The clown looked at me and stopped grinning. He stared at me for a long while as I watched the unblinking look in his big black eyes. Then he smiled wide again, those pointed fangs jetting out like razors, and walked away from me and went to speak to someone else. I watched him unfazed as he walked up to a woman that was standing with a small child, and I saw her look at him and act completely normal, as though he was just the average person in a costume. I couldn't shake the feeling that these actors were really into their jobs, and I guess it made it okay they were getting into the whole spirit of the season. I heard Joe scream my name, "Reggie, come here quick." I walked over to where he was standing and looked at him. He was holding that damn stupid mask on his face. "Dude, seriously? Get something scary." "It won't come off." I looked at him and smirked. "What do you mean it won't come off?" I looked over at Eric, who was now standing next to me with a package of fake mustaches. I looked down at the bag and rolled my eyes. "What is going on?" Eric asked us, looking at us both. "It won't come off, guys." "This isn't funny, man. Come on, I'm ready to go." I looked at them both and began to walk away. "No, please!" Eric yelled, and he was now making a scene. Parents and other customers were looking at him like he was just some crazy teenager on drugs.
"Can I be of assistance?"
said one of the green clowns that were now standing in front of me. "It won't come off." Eric yelled again. This time I could hear the tears in his voice. I was suddenly very concerned, and the clown just looked down and grinned at Eric.
"Come with me. I think I may be able to assist you."
Joe was still freaking out. "I can't breathe." His voice was now growing muffled, and the clown grabbed him by the arm and pulled him towards the back of the store. I followed behind with Eric behind me.
"Where do you think you two are going?"
"We're going with you to help our friend."
"Oh, don't worry. We'll take good care of him."
He pointed to a sign that read, "All customers are important to us here at Mr. Funtimes." He took Joe with him and shut the door behind. I heard it lock when I ran to open it. It wouldn't budge. "What the hell?" Eric asked. "I guess we'll just wait." We waited for what seemed like hours, but had only been about 30 minutes. We stood there and watched as all the customers in the store shopping had checked out. The zombie girl with the dead eyes and pink hair was rigging stuff up, but she was doing so in such a cathartic state, it was apparent to me something was wrong. I looked around the entire store and saw clowns walking people towards the other doors, like the one we were standing by currently. I looked around, and finally the door opened and Joe came out, looking as dead as the girl in the pink hair. Eric and I were both relieved, but there was something wrong with his eyes. He looked like he was stoned or something. "Hey man, you okay?" asked Eric. "Let's go," he mumbled. Eric and I didn't waste any time getting out of that store because there was something off about the entire place. When I got home, I was in the mood to watch television and forgot about the events of the afternoon. The next day I was at school sitting at the lunch table with Eric and Joe, and Eric and I talked about sports, which was a usual thing for us. Joe stared blankly at the table. As soon as the bell rang for our 1 o'clock period, he stood up mechanically and walked out of the cafeteria. Eric and I looked at each other. What was wrong with him? He walked down the hallway and out the front door of the school. "Joe, where are you going?" He didn't answer, he just kept walking. Eric tried to stop him, but he just ignored us and kept going. We followed him all the way back to Mr. Funtime's Halloween extravaganza. There was no way we were going back into that place. It creeped me out. "Stop! If you break it, you pay for it," said Joe, and walked into the store, shutting the door behind him. I walked inside, but Joe was nowhere to be found. I looked around and there were still customers and the green clowns. Eric and I looked at each other and ran through the store trying to find Joe. "Joe!" I yelled, but I couldn't seem to find him. I saw the same girl at the counter with the pink hair. She just kept ringing items with no expression on her face. "Joe!" Eric called out, and then one of the clowns stopped us.
Hey there. Better stop running through the store before you break something or worse, get hurt.
"Where's Joe, my friend from yesterday?" The clown just stared blankly at us, and I rushed past him as I saw Joe go through the same door from yesterday. The door shut behind him, and once again I found myself unable to open it. "Let's go get help," Eric said, and we left the store. The two of us ran to find someone who could help us out. We went to the local police station, and when we got there, Eric and I ran straight up to the counter where there was an officer. "Please, you have to help us. Something happened to our friend." The officer looked concerned and allowed us to explain our story. He seemed doubtful and told us to leave. There is no such place as Mr. Funtime's Halloween extravaganza. I think you boys need to get home and stop trying to play pranks on the police before you get into real trouble. Eric and I looked at each other, defeated. We walked out of the station, and then we both decided to go back ourselves to see if we could try and help Joe. Before we did, however, we stopped at his parents' house to see if he had come back. "I'm sorry, boys, I think you have the wrong house," said Joe's mom as she shut the door. Eric and I were becoming panicked now and were unsure of what to do. It was like Joe never existed. The store never existed, and our story was growing colder by the second. We decided to go back to the store, but when we got there, there was no sign or trace of the once fun-filled extravaganza ever existed. We walked around the building and looked for a sign, any sign at all. We looked at the doors that were now boarded up with wood. The building that used to be our local mall looked exactly like it did before the pop-up shop moved in. We never saw Joe again after that, but I keep an eye out for Mr. Funtime's Halloween extravaganza in case it pops up somewhere else. Eric and I have each other and we know what happened. The only thing that still bothers me is why didn't his mom even recall Joe's existence? That was last year, and just the other day I had a ray of hope. I noticed the girl with the pink hair sitting on the sidewalk not far from where the store had been. She was smoking a cigarette and she still had that same dead-eyed look on her face. I approached her and asked about Joe. "Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about because I never worked in any Halloween store. I think you must have the wrong person." "No, I'm sure of it." I stopped mid-sentence as I could see a tattoo on her forearm of a green clown with large black eyes. The clown's mouth was wide open and there was a tattoo of Joe as he was being swallowed whole by a big green clown with razor-sharp teeth. I grabbed her arm to get a better look.
Hey, you break it, you pay for it.
Running over to the dining room window, I called back over my shoulder. "What is it, Dad?" My father dropped the fork he was holding, spilling a glass of red wine onto his newest work shirt. He didn't even notice. "Jesus Christ," he said, losing his cool for a brief moment. "I don't know." He stood next to me as we watched the yellowish blur rapidly change directions above our town. It looked like some type of ship. "Where'd it go?" my dad whispered. "There," I yelled. Our town was located along a 6-mile-long lake, and we watched in awe as the bright object zigzagged rapidly from one corner to the other at speeds that even a child could tell were impossible. My father took out his cell phone, more in the state of shock than calmness, and dialed. Having been a deputy up until last year, he had the number memorized. "Sheriff, this is Doug Turner." My father paused, still watching the light dance around the dark sky above. "Sheriff, look up." There was more silence then, as I assumed the sheriff was as confused and perhaps afraid as we were. My father hung up and looked back over at me. "He's gonna make some calls. Says it's probably just someone testing out a new drone." The ominous yellow light turned dark then, a moment after looking to have landed near Williams Ranch at the east corner of town. "Come on, you gotta get some rest for school," my father said. I think he tried to hide what he was really feeling. He forced a smile as the phone rang again. "This is Doug." "Yes, sir. Give me about 20 minutes. My father looked over at me, and for a second, I thought I saw the fear on his face. He pushed it aside. "Come on, let's get you to bed." He tucked me in and kissed me on the forehead. Before I could tell him to be careful, he tried his best to ease my worries. "Don't worry, I'm sure it's nothing. Sheriff says he's bringing 3 or 4 others along." He winked. "Whatever it is, I'll be careful." And when he was gone, leaving the light on near my bed and closing the front door with a click, I was home alone, but no one in the town ever worried about such things as burglars, or worse. At least, not yet. I don't know how I fell asleep, but all I can tell you is I woke up the next morning with a terrible headache. My father hadn't come home. Clutching my head tightly, I still managed to run into the kitchen and was surprised to see him waiting for me at the table. "Good morning, son." I looked over at him with confusion as he made no attempt to go over the previous night. "What was it, Dad?" His blank expression held. "What was what, son?" I became more confused. "The yellow light, the thing in the sky that you and Sheriff went to check? I think you must have had a nightmare, son," he replied firmly. And then he stood up from the table and smiled. It didn't ease my fear, only enhancing it, as the smile turned into a grin far wider than I was accustomed to. "Say, you know what? I've been thinking that maybe you can take the day off from school today. Maybe we can go for a little field trip." "Yeah, sure," I replied uneasily. "Do you mind if I rest a little first, though? I've got a really bad headache." His smile deflated a little at that, as he seemed to be thinking it over. A moment later, it came back in full force. "Sure thing. Get some rest and we'll head out around noon. I've got something to show you." He kissed me on the forehead as he had the night before, but this time it was awkward, and it made me feel, well, scared. Going back to my room, I shut the door behind me and pressed my head into the pillow to try and dull the pain. How could he not remember last night? Was it actually possible I had dreamt the whole thing? As I stood and looked out the window, though, thoughts from the previous night rushed back. I remembered details that I had somehow forgotten. I hadn't fallen asleep as my father had gone to check out the strange sighting with the sheriff. I had instead sat by the window and watched. I can't remember everything, but I know I saw something. 20 minutes or so after my father had left to meet the sheriff, there was a blinding flash of light that emanated from where we had last seen the object land. It flickered yellow, then red, then a silverish green that I can't even put into words. After that, the memories stop. I don't recall falling asleep, and I definitely don't remember my father returning that night. I don't know what is going on, but I'm scared as hell as I wonder about his plans for today. Why am I so afraid? I love my father. I trust my father. Yet I can't stop thinking of the unreal colors and amazing flashes of light that I'm somehow certain were from some type of ship. And I've never seen anything move that fast before. My intuition yells out to me that it's not from this world, and that I have every reason to be afraid of what's to come. I don't know what's going to happen later today, but one thought keeps replaying itself over and over in my head. I keep thinking that if my father and I go up to William's ranch, that I might not make it back. My headache grew worse, perhaps due to my anxiety of what the rest of the day might hold. My brain thought of what my father planned to show me, and where we might go. I'm ashamed that one thought was more prevalent than all the others. Is he even still my father? I'm not sure how much time passed before the door creaked open slowly, and I opened my eyes to see him grinning over at me. "It's time," he said quietly. My eyes met his, and before I could tell him how my headache had gotten worse, or think of some other excuse to stay at home, he continued, "Don't worry. Once we get there, you'll feel a lot better, I promise." I nodded. Perhaps a different day, I would have had the willpower to argue, or to think through the events of the previous night with more clarity, but not in my current condition. The pounding in my head felt like a jackhammer hard at work inside my skull, and was so intense now that I could barely open my eyes, let alone argue. He helped me up to his old red pickup truck, gave me a pillow to press my head against, and closed the door behind me. The engine of the old Ford started up easily, and I drifted in and out of sleep as he put the car in drive and made his way down the long road into town. Opening my eyes for a moment, a bright patch of pine trees could be seen out my window. I saw a family of deer as well, their eyes seeming to focus on me as we made our way into town. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me, but for a moment I thought I saw sadness in their faces. They almost looked worried, but not for themselves. When we got into town, it was unlike anything I had ever seen. My friends, my family were there, as if they had been waiting for me. Their eyes were so cheerful and joyous that they seemed to almost glow, and as we drove further through the town square, each one of them smiled from ear to ear as we passed by. Every single person in town waved, almost in unison. "They're happy to see you," my father said, chuckling. "Where are we going, Dad?" Before my eyelids fell again from the pain, I saw him look over at me and wink for a second time that day. "We're going to where it all begins." I must have fallen asleep then, because the next thing I knew I was standing in an open field of lavender that must have been William's ranch. The sun wasn't as bright as it had been while we'd driven, and strangely enough my headache was almost completely gone now. "You ready?" my father asked, and I noticed that his eyes weren't the calm brown I had known before, but now some type of silver. "Ready for what?" I asked. "Ready to see it," he said, holding that same grin and stepping aside. On the ground behind him lay a circular silver disc, maybe only a few feet wide. I found it almost unimaginable that such a small object could have been responsible for the blinding display that we had seen the previous night. "That's it?" I asked. My father nodded. "Go closer," he said. I shuddered, the first time since awakening, feeling an urge of fear make its way through my body. "I don't want to get closer," he interrupted, his tone changing only slightly towards anger, and perhaps impatience. I don't know where to, but maybe I would have run then, far away from this place and far away from the dream of it all. Yet, right then, the people around us came into view. Every friend and family member I knew stood in a circle around us. They didn't say a word, but their intentions were clear enough. They were waiting. I understood then that I was the last. "Don't be afraid, son," my father said. "You'll understand in a moment." I knew then that I didn't have much choice in the matter, and though beyond terrified, I began to walk past my father and towards the small silver object ahead of me. The strange thing was, the closer that I got, the less small it seemed. At first, I had noted it to be only just a few feet in diameter. Now, as I approached the object, it seemed to go on for miles. How was that even possible? As it loomed just in front of my gaze, I began to understand my father's words. This object wasn't a craft or alien ship. It was much more. The thing began to show me what it would bring to our world. There would be no more fighting and no more war. There would be no more sickness and no more pain. There would be no more death. Still, there was something frightening, I realized, hidden below its smooth surface. Something dark, and something wrong, and something. "You're the last in our town," my father continued. "Go ahead, son. Reach out." His eyes were darker, than yet they somehow glowed, and it seemed like I was just an observer in some terrible nightmare. I saw my hand reach out, crossing the bridge between worlds, touching the silver object that seemed to go on forever. I suddenly understood everything. In the span of an instant, the 12-year-old boy I had been was dead. And in the same moment, I understood completely why my father and the other townspeople had been smiling. Of course they should be smiling. I began to smile too. No more pain, no more death, no more war. Well, that's not completely true. There would be one more war. In fact, it would be the war to end all wars. I smiled wider as the others had, understanding that now I would be on the winning side. I just got home from my job delivering pizzas in a small town in North Carolina, and my heart is still pounding from what I saw tonight. I just started recently, and this was my first night shift. I hope it's my last. I was going back to the store after delivery a little after 9 o'clock when I saw it riding towards me on a bicycle. It looked like a person for the most part, but it was wearing one of those blank plastic Halloween masks like you can get at any store. The mask had a wavy line from the top left, wearer's right, to the bottom right, which separated the mask into a purple half and an orange half. I couldn't tell what it was wearing because it was too dark and the clothes were black. Out on the top of the mask there was something that could have been hair, but it seemed strange to me. The hair was at least a foot tall on its own, and the only way I can describe it as a plant of some sort. It looked like a bunch of tangled branches and vines all sprouting from the thing's head. It was doing a wheel stand all the way down the street towards me without losing an iota of balance. The thing that really tipped me off that this wasn't human, though, was the aura it gave off. I couldn't stop looking at it for more than a second. It drew my eyes almost magnetically. Every second I looked at it, the more terrified I felt. It wasn't just my natural reaction of fear either. This was powerful and evil. My head started pounding. I was screaming involuntarily and tears welled up in my eyes. I was about to make a turn when I saw it coming towards me, and as soon as I completed the turn, barely able to look at where I was going, the thing disappeared. I turned around to look back down the street I was just on, and it was gone. I was still extremely rattled, panting and whining like a dog, but I knew I had to make it back to the store. I made a slight left onto the long avenue where my store was located when I saw it riding towards me again, still doing a wheel stand. It started out on my right, but rode around me to get on my left as I proceeded towards the store. I was trying my best to outrun it, but it was keeping up with me exactly, until it suddenly jumped off the bike onto the sidewalk and caught it without effort. I was still screaming and tearlessly crying the whole time, but I whipped my truck into the store lot, hoping it meant safety. To my horror, I saw a bicycle, not belonging to anyone in the store, leaned up against the wall directly in front of my parking spot. I looked across the street to see where I had seen the thing hit the ground and saw that there was nothing there. I hesitated to even leave my truck, but I had to complete my shift, so I went inside with my guard up as much as it could be considering how terrified I was. My coworkers were all fine, but there were no customers in the store. That's not unusual considering the time of night, but that meant that the bicycle's owner was MIA. I rubbed my face for a few moments in front of a fan and grabbed my next delivery. I exited the store to discover the bicycle was gone, even though I hadn't noticed anyone move it. I worked the rest of my shift until 10 o'clock and didn't see the thing again. That's not to say there was nothing out of the ordinary, but the bike stalker was gone at least. The whole way home I was unnaturally paranoid. Around every curve and corner, I feared it would be standing in the road, waiting for me. I could see it in my head. The vision I had of it standing on a certain bridge on the way home felt so real that I nearly drove into the creek. I'm home now, in what I hope is safety, but I'm definitely still on edge. I've seen a lot of things in my 20 years, but I have never experienced anything like that. I delivered pizzas from age 19 to 23, 2009 to 2013, in a crappy part of town. One night near close, we got a shady sounding order, I didn't take the call, to a fake address, and they changed it to another when we wouldn't deliver. We had a sneaking suspicion something was up, so I brought the cook with me and we both brought large metal pipes with us. He just stood next to my car while I went to the door. When I knocked, the porch light flicked on and off a few times. I knocked again and the porch light flickers. It happens a few more times until some grouchy, middle-aged man opens the door. Think Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Bluntly tells me he didn't order and shut the door in my face. When we left, we noticed a bunch of hooded guys in the bushes across the street. Later that night, a rival pizza chain driver was robbed on that street. I'm a girl, and when I was delivering pizzas, I was around 18 to 19. Pretty scrawny looking thing. Anyways, I had a big delivery to a guy's party in his apartment. The apartment was on the top floor, so after hauling about 10 pizzas up 3 flights of stairs, I looked considerably frazzled. The guy opens the door and there are about 15 men in the apartment, and he says I should come in and put them down on the table. Now, I know better than to just enter people's houses, but this table was right near the door and there was no way I was going to be able to take his cash with 3 pizza bags draped over my arms. So I take one step towards the table and hear the door slam shut behind me. He locks the door and says,
"We got one."
And all these guys start snickering, and although it turned out to be a joke, albeit not a funny one, it was one of the most terrifying moments in my life.
Good morning, sunshine. Time to wake up.
I open my eyes and see Nurse Judy ready to give me my morning injection. I sit on the bed and roll up my pajama sleeve. I feel the needle under my skin and the medication flowing inside my veins. The nurse gives me a wide smile.
Good girl. You can go in the canteen now and have breakfast with your friends.
Friends. I don't have friends here. My friends are almost 60 miles away from me, enjoying life, learning new stuff, making out at parties, certainly not getting their youth in a psychiatric ward. My parents put me here. It was after another anxiety attack at school. I lost control and tried to do something stupid. Now everything seems stupid to me. I pass by Nasty Nora's room. Her yelling is impossible to ignore. She keeps screaming Kelly and Jenna over and over again. Whatever these names mean. I see 2 doctors rushing to her room with a set of tranquilizers. This place is full of people like her. I don't belong here. I enter the canteen and hear aloud, "Surprise!" I look around and see the other patients gathered around with cake and a number of candles. 1 and 7, and an inscription, "Happy birthday, Robin." Right, it's my 17th birthday. Yay, I totally forgot. I force myself to smile and blow out the candles. The cake tastes like soap or cough syrup. I hide both candle in my pockets when nobody's watching. I guess it's the only gift I can count on today. I stop one of the nurses on the way back to my room. I ask if my parents are going to see me. She shrugs and walks away without saying a word. Bitch. As I lay in bed, I stretch my arms and look at my hands. They look so weird. So damn weird. Maybe it's a side effect of those medications. Nurse Judy interrupts my contemplation. She storms in with an afternoon dosage of pills. "How are you feeling, my dear? Did you like the birthday surprise?" She asks with that annoyingly sweet smile. "Yeah, I forgot today's the day." She takes my hand and says, "Oh, don't worry, darling. It happens to everybody." As she holds my hand, I ask her why my skin looks so strange. Nurse Judy gives me a sympathetic gaze. "I think it's normal at your age, don't you think so, sweetie?" Is she trying to make a fool of me? Oh, I've had enough. "But I'm only 17, I say imploringly. "I don't know any other teenager with hands like these. Just look." I take the candles out of my pocket and almost rub them in her face. "You see? 1 and 7. 17, I bellow. Judy gently takes the candles from my shaking hands. "Robin, it's not 17. Let me show you the right order. It's 7 and then 1. 71. My mother, sister, and I sat at the dinner table. "Have you 2 done your chores today?" my mom said, breaking the silence. Nina proudly nodded whilst I said nothing. Mom raised an eyebrow at me. "My job is to fetch the clothing from the washing line outside. I had procrastinated all day, so I had to fetch them at night as punishment." I rolled my eyes and left the dining room. The moment I opened the back door, my knees trembled. The backyard was pitch black, and I could only make out the shape of the washing line, until my eyes caught something move. In the darkness, there was what I could only describe as an orb, and it seemed to be slowly moving closer. The night merely looked dull in comparison to this thing, which grew darker the longer that I stared at it. This object in the middle of the yard definitely wasn't an animal. It was the size of a dog, indeed, but it was perfectly round. My legs caught up to my mind and I raced inside. "I think I saw something outside," I said, panting. "Come on now, Rachel, it's probably just a cat," Nina said as she stood up. "I'll get the clothes myself." That was the last time I ever saw my sister alive. I should have stopped her, but I went straight to bed after finishing dinner. Minutes later, I was awoken by my panicked mother. "Rachel, wake up. I can't find Nina." By that point, My mother had already searched everywhere, but we searched a second time together. We even checked outside. No luck. After half an hour, it was time to call the police. As we anxiously waited inside, I had an idea. "Mom, she probably had her phone with her." My hand immediately swiped my phone from my pocket. I began calling. No answer straight away. Then the humming began. My sister's familiar, mellow ringtone arose in the house. We anxiously followed the music. We left the kitchen. The ringtone grew louder. It led us to the corridor. It grew louder. We entered Nina's room. It softened. We went into my bedroom. It was the loudest there. We flipped my bedroom upside down in a matter of mere seconds, throwing blankets and books around as we searched for the phone. There came a moment when my mother stopped looking and froze at the center of the bedroom. "Where is it?" I hissed out of frustration. "Rachel," my mother whispered. I turned my head from my desk and towards my mom. Her palm was clasped around her mouth, and she was glaring at the ground with her eyes widened. She was petrified, and I didn't yet understand why. My mother then dropped to her knees. Her head fell to the ground with her left ear fixed to the carpet. "Rachel, it's coming from underneath the house." I woke up, cramped, in a dark, confined space. I felt cramps surge throughout my entire body, feeling as if I had been laying in the same position forever. I screamed and clawed at the ceiling, scratching and picking until my fingernails bled and broke off. I used my feet and hands to kick at the wood, all the while knowing there was no use. Who the hell put me in here? How did I get here? I thought with rage and frustration. I decided to pound the wood one more time, and use my legs to kick and push the hardest I could ever do. I stomped, banging my sore and mangled feet against the wood, until the final blow managed to completely break through the wood, and I was too pumped with adrenaline to acknowledge the pain running through my foot. I looked up through the wood and saw darkness. I knew I couldn't be outside. It was too musty and damp to be out in fresh air. I managed to pull myself through the wood, climbing up on top of the auburn box. I clawed my way through the muddied walls, picking worms and bugs off me along the way. I used my fists to punch through the dirt as hard as possible, until I felt my hand break through and reach the soft grass. A cold breeze whisking through my fingers. It was the strangest feeling. I groaned as I used my head to break through the dirt, and pulled myself up onto the wet, dewy grass until I couldn't move any longer. I lay there, soaking in the earth, feeling the wind on my face. My white dress was almost brown with dirt, and a few bugs were still crawling up my legs. I rubbed my swollen wrists and noticed a shiny golden bracelet. Engraved in the bracelet were the words, "I will always love you, Dustin." Dustin? Who the hell was he? I don't know anyone. I looked to my left and noticed that there was a small rock next to the dirt I tore through. I leaned in closer to read the writing when my heart dropped in my chest. Fiona Holiday, love of my life, lasted 3 months, October 9th, 2018. No, that couldn't be me. If I died, wouldn't I remember? Then something clicked. I wasn't in a cemetery at all. I was in someone's backyard. There were no neighboring houses. This was completely isolated. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. Being dead sounded awful enough, but why was I in someone's backyard? Was I murdered? Do my parents know what happened to me? I tried to stand up, but I fell, my knees buckling beneath me. I crawled around, desperate to find something that would indicate where I was. I wondered if there were others. I reached out my hands, grabbing anything that wasn't grass, then came across 5 other rocks, all a couple inches away from each other. Casey Jones, love of my life, lasted 7 months, February 2nd, 2017. Vanessa Walters, love of my life, lasted 3 weeks, July 7th, 2016. Delilah Woods, love of my life, lasted 2 days, August 15th, 2016. Hannah Gomez, love of my life, lasted 1 year, November 22nd, 2015. Jessica Hansen, love of my life, lasted 7 years, April 12th, 2012. I covered my mouth and scooted back. This had to be a nightmare or some kind of prank. Surely there's not 5 other women buried here. The only way to find out is to dig. I cringed and carefully crept back towards one of the rocks. Casey Jones, I'm sorry for disturbing your sleep. I began to claw at the dirt until I reached a smooth, cold surface. It wasn't wood. There was no coffin. I grabbed at the object, pulling it up towards me, digging my bloody nails into the soft, cold rubber, until I realized that I had grabbed a hand. I screamed and dropped the hand, peering down into the hole. A half-skeleton / human lay there, in a floral blouse and shorts, a golden bracelet on her right wrist saying, "To the love of my life, Dustin." I felt sick. I turned over to the patch of grass next to me and puked my brains out. I gently grabbed some little flowers growing in the grass and laid them on her chest. "I'm so sorry," I sobbed. I scooped the dirt back over her corpse and patted it until it was firm. I laid the rock above her. Now, my next move would be to run. The backyard was chained up. There was no way I could leave. I couldn't climb very high. I decided to try prying open the back door. I know, stupid, but maybe I can convince Dustin he's dreaming. Much to my luck, the door was unlocked. I slowly slid it open and forced myself to stand up, and shakily tiptoed through the kitchen when something caught my eye. There were missing posters everywhere, all over his fridge. I crept towards the fridge and nearly fainted at the sight. All the girls with their alive, smiling faces plastered on missing posters. I saw myself. Have you seen me? Fiona Elizabeth Holliday. Date of birth, July 1st, 2003. Age 15. Last seen wearing a white dress and red sandals on July 2nd, 2018 in Redacted, California. Description: green eyes, long blonde hair, height and weight 5'3" and approximately 110 pounds. I shakily grabbed at the poster and tore it to shreds. It suddenly dawned on me that I never found out how I died. I frantically looked around the room until I spotted a video camera propped up on a shelf. I managed to snag it off the shelf and open it up. My eyes were exposed to the most horrific and vile videos I've ever seen. He labeled each video Casey's Catastrophe, Delilah's Demise, Vanessa's Vendetta, Jessica's Jealousy, Hannah's Hysteria, and mine, Fiona's Fatality. They were homemade snuff films. There I was, drugged up and tied to a chair. "What did I do?" I cried in the video. "I'm sorry, my love, but I can't trust you anymore. You've tried to run away multiple times, and you blew every last chance," he cooed. His voice sent shivers down my spine in a way I can't even explain. I don't even want to explain what he did to me. I was stabbed multiple times in the chest, and then he broke my neck. I puked a little in my mouth and quickly turned the camera off. I slowly lifted up my dress and ran my fingers along my stomach and chest. Large, bumpy scars lined across my torso. I shuddered. The sound of footsteps thumping down the stairs made me jump. I stood, frozen with fear.
"Who is it?"
A gruff man's voice called out. He ran into the kitchen, baseball bat in hand, turning around and laying his eyes on me. "Miss me, Dustin?" I whispered.
Fiona? No. You're dead. Who the fuck are you?"
He cried. "I thought I was the love of your life, Dustin. Why did you have to kill me?" I mocked. He just stared.
"No, this isn't happening. I'm not having this conversation. I'm dreaming."
I slowly walked towards him. He clutched the bat tighter. He whimpered. "Shh," I cooed. I put my hand on his. "Let me just say one thing before you wake up," I said. He slowly nodded his head. I leaned in closer. "It's your turn." I yanked the metal bat from his trembling hands and began to smash it into his head, bashing his skull in, blood spraying everywhere. He withered to the ground, and I continued to smash until I physically couldn't any longer. I dropped the bat to the floor, grabbed the video camera and all of the missing posters, and bolted out of the house. It was dark, and I had nowhere to go. I was on top of a hill. I turned back and glanced at the house one last time before running off and trying to locate the nearest police station. If I told them what really happened, they'd call me crazy and brush me off. Or worse, send me off to a science lab to experiment on me. I concocted an elaborate and gory, but very believable and accurate story. All I had was my strength and my evidence, and maybe, I thought, I'll find my family again. The time traveler appeared in a brilliant flash of light. I dropped my bowl of cereal. "Don't be afraid," she proclaimed, taking off her helmet, letting her graying hair fall. "I'm you from the future." "What?" "I am from about 37 years in your future, precisely 325,000 hours. I'm 57 years old now, which means you must be 20? 19. My birthday's tomorrow." "Great. Good. This is an unsanctioned visit, so unfortunately, I don't have authorization to change anything major." "What does that mean?" "Time is a little malleable at points, but everything someone like me does in the past has to be pre-evaluated by a committee so they can track all the possible ripple effects. Butterflies and hurricanes, you understand, right?" "I guess. And of course, if something were to cause a timeline where time travel were never invented, that creates a paradox which could shred the fabric of space-time. Theoretically, of course. Nobody's actually tried." "Uh-huh. I wanted to visit you the official way, but there's no way I would have been approved. You are too timeline critical. But I figured out a loophole. As long as I tell you everything you need to do in life, and you do it all perfectly, nobody will know the difference." Wait. You're telling me that you're here illegally to tell me that my entire life is a foregone conclusion, and that if I try to change anything, it'll maybe blow up like the entire universe? Hey, shh, we can't risk anyone hearing this conversation. I shot her a glare as she continued. It's all stuff you were going to do anyways, and I can't change what happens to you, but maybe, with little luck, I'll be able to change how you feel about what happens. What does happen to me? Tomorrow, your friends will take you to a party for your birthday. There, you'll meet a wonderful man. He'll have kind eyes and a warm smile, and you'll fall in love with him. In 3 years, you'll be married. 20 years after that, he'll be the first person to invent time travel. What's he like? The time traveler paused for a minute before continuing. I want you to know that he's trying his best. He's a brilliant man, but sometimes he's troubled. On his better days, he is so madly in love with you. She didn't answer. And then I asked the question I'd been dying to ask since she first appeared. Where'd you get those bruises from? So here I am, lying on my deathbed, still in agony. I won't be around much longer, and I guess all I can do is relay my story in hopes that someone, anyone, will heed my warning and do what I didn't. So, here it goes. My name is Jason. I'm 22 years of age, and a week ago today, I messed up. As you know, it's that time of year again. Spooktober's just around the corner. Stores are already fueling the craze with cheaply made cosmetics and decorations. Big brands and corporations are releasing new products so they can reap the rewards of a gimmick holiday. Because that's all it is, a gimmick. A quick cash grab for big names. An excuse for people to go out partying, and an excuse for children to drag their not as excited parents out of their comfort for candy and sugary goods. But I'm getting off topic. I work a standard warehouse job. My coworkers are friendly enough, if not irritating at times, but if you're in any field of work, you'll know yourself that's nothing new. If you're like me, you keep your head down and keep to yourself, socializing to your coworkers at times, but mostly keeping to yourself and working in hopes that the day will go by quicker. It was on this particular day that I was feeling adventurous. Friday, the last day of my working week, until I can sit at home for the weekend and do as I please. On this particular day, I didn't make any breakfast or lunch, and decided I'd splash my cash on a breakfast sandwich from the local food wagon that stops outside of my workplace. This was my first mistake. If I had just made my own lunch, this never would have happened. 10:15 a.m. comes around and I hear the jingle of the approaching wagon. My stomach rumbling in anticipation for what delights are about to come my way. I hastily jump up from my workstation and get to the van as my coworkers all race to be first in line and get the best picks before they're gone. Luckily for me, I reacted fast and got straight to the wagon, my eyes taking in the beautiful sight of all the hot, pastry-baked goods inside. But that wasn't the first thing I noticed. A colorful blue and orange can by the cold goods section stole my gaze away from the rest. A can of Day of the Dead themed Monster Energy. Now, I've never tried Monster before in my life. That sugar-filled crap isn't good for anyone. But something was different. Whether it be the vibrant colors or the pretty printed skeletons on the can, I wanted it. Something I wouldn't otherwise want. I wanted. I glanced away for a second, pondering. I grabbed some hot food and picked up the can without thinking twice about it any longer. I paid for my goods and retired back to my workstation, a grin on my face. I didn't hesitate. This was for my lunch, but I was too hungry and couldn't help myself. I sat down and began scoffing down my meal, practically inhaling every bite. I cracked open the can, staring at it for a second before taking a small sip of the yellow liquid inside. I took a deep breath and took in a bit of the fluid. Mango, bubbling, fizzy, exotic mango. That's all? I muttered, slightly disappointed. The festive design was just there to draw me in to purchase the drink, and it had worked. Oh well, I guess I couldn't complain. The drink was still tasty, and I needed something to wash down the rest of my food. I finished my meal and continued working, taking gulps of the drink occasionally as I worked. After about an hour or two of working, the pain started. A dull, burning sensation in the pit of my stomach arose without warning. While slightly irritating, it wasn't anything major. I kept my composure and continued working away, longing for 17:30 p.m., my finishing time for the day. A passing coworker's gaze was captured by the colorful can set next to me. Monster Energy, huh? You know that stuff's practically poison. It'll burn you from the inside out. I glanced up, in awe at the nerve of this guy. It's just an energy drink. I thought I'd give it a try. And what I buy with my money is my concern and only mine. I slammed back at him. Your funeral, buddy, he said in a condescending tone, a smirk crossing across his face. Looking back, I wish I had listened. Maybe then I wouldn't be where I am today. Hours later, it was time to leave. The burning had persisted since it had started, slowly growing more painful as time went. I got home and took some Pepto to hopefully calm my stomach a bit. I didn't think anything of the pains. I thought maybe it was because I wasn't used to the sugar content in energy drinks and my tummy was having a tough time coming to terms with what had entered it early on that day. I went about my business, made dinner, relaxed in front of the TV for the night, and went to bed without event. That's when it happened. I woke up in the middle of the night to agonizing pain in my lower torso and top of my legs. I tried to get up and see what was causing the pain, but I couldn't move. I couldn't feel the rest of my legs. I leaned over to turn on the lamp and, oh God, I wish I didn't. I wish I'd never drank that stupid energy drink. My stomach was exposed. A big, smoldering hole in my gut leading into where my stomach and intestines should have been, but they weren't there. They were gone. I slowly realized what was going on, and as the pain intensified, blood oozing out of the wound as well as a rancid, yellow substance that began burning anything it touched. That's when I realized something even more disturbing. The yellow substance had completely melted away my digestive system and had worked its way through my spinal cord and flesh of my lower back. That's why I couldn't feel my legs. I was paralyzed. Any hope of being able to get up, walk, or do anything burned away by the vicious yellow fluid erupting from my insides. Strangely, the liquid seemed to grow. As in, it seemed to create more of itself out of nowhere. I reached for the phone on my bedside table and frantically dialed emergency services, excruciating pain erupting from the entirety of my lower body, the parts I still had sensation in anyway. All I could do was lay there helplessly, as my body was dissolved, waiting for an ambulance to arrive. That's when I blacked out. I awoke a few hours ago. The lower half of my body, as well as my digestive system, is gone. Some of my vital organs, like my liver and kidneys, are also gone, turned into puddles a week ago when it happened. Apparently, I'd been in a coma-like state ever since, and I've now been told I don't have long left to live. A couple of hours at best. Doctors are surprised I've been alive this long, even on their machines and life support. Take heed of my warning and listen carefully to what I have to say next. The next time you feel drawn into something you wouldn't usually get, or you feel an odd vibe off something, don't go through with it. I made the mistake of letting a marketing trick draw me in, and it's become my demise. I hope you all have a lovely Halloween. Enjoy the festivities. Waste your money on your candy and Halloween-themed drinks. It became my demise and downfall. This entry was found in the diary of the recently deceased Jason Crawford. The cause of his demise is of yet unknown, and the mysterious substance found at the scene of the incident is just as strange. It's unknown what the substance is or how it came to be inside of an energy drink, and it's been as of yet unidentifiable by forensics. But be warned, and steer clear of any canned beverages for the time being. This liquid could still be out there, ready to claim another life.